Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel Sawani, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm here today with another one of my channeled messages from celebrity guides. In this series we're going to be interviewing or channeling David Bowie, and there's a few different reasons why I chose David Bowie. Mainly because he started showing up with Freddie Mercury around me for a few days in a row, and he got my attention in that way. And then he started to come in for a few different clients of mine. So I have channeled him a few times in my sessions with clients. But as far as my relationship with David goes, I don't know him that well. I obviously know Freddie Mercury a lot better because he's been my guide longer. He's been around me for about 4 months now. David is a new personality to me. I wasn't really into his music at all, I have to say. I really only knew maybe 1 or 2 songs, just a few songs. And so since I've met him, I've definitely been delving deep into all of his music. He has well over 20 recorded studio albums out there, so a lot of songs, a lot of music, a lot of different styles and genres. He's played many different roles and characters in his life when it comes to how he presents himself on stage and in his musical style and lyrical style. I don't really need to give him much of a introduction because most people know who he is and the legacy that he left. I don't know the exact time of his passing. I do know that he died of liver cancer, and we're going to focus mostly on how he wants to help us, why he shows up as a spirit guide for people, what some of his life lessons and themes were. And we're just going to spend the next 45 minutes or hour or so just kind of getting to know him, his energy, his personality, and really what his message is for us at this time as we're moving through the Ascension process on Earth. I do know a little bit about him. I do know a little bit about his galactic heritage. We'll ask him officially later in this video because it's come through again when I've channeled him for other clients. So I'm really intrigued by him as a guide. I had to do I was channeling him before I actually did research on him, so I know a little bit about his style and what he wants to help us with from how he's presented himself as a guide to certain clients of mine. But I have a lot more questions for him, and it's taken me a while to get to the point of being able to make this video just because I've had a really busy schedule, and I was kind of putting it off, and then he came to me in my dreams one night, and literally we just hung out in my dream the whole night. So it was really cool because it was really laid back. It wasn't like a formal type of hanging out. It was just like he was around and we would just talk, and there were other people in my dream and I was doing normal dream stuff, but David Bowie was there. And I was fascinated by him in my dream because I didn't know anything about him as a person, and I was really taken aback at how down to earth he was. At that time I had never even seen an interview of him or heard him speak. So in my dream, I really connected with him on that energetic level, on that heart level, and I just felt so comfortable with him. And I could totally see how he was so charismatic and how people could easily fall in love with him as a person because he was just really easy to talk to. He just was really comfortable to be around. So that's been my first presentation of David Bowie. And so anyways, I'd like to get to the questions, get to the channeling. I've already invited him in. I've asked him to pull some cards from different decks, as I do with some of the other guides. It's just a way for me to kind of get to know the guide and make a good connection with them. I've also asked him some questions on my own and channeled some of his answers down on paper to just make sure I was getting his messages clearly coming through. All right, so let's just get into the questions that I have and some of the cards that came up. My first question is, describe your personality. What are you like? What are you like is basically, let's talk about you, David, because I don't know you that well. He's saying, well, I'm extremely down to earth, as you've already highlighted through your dream. You experienced my personality, or got a taste of what my personality is like, and that's truly the main aspect of who I am, and how I present. And I was always relatable and personable, coming from the reality of me being a big star and a rock icon. I never really saw myself that way. I was humbled by it all. He's talking about fame, how he felt. It was an experience for him. He didn't necessarily like it too much or feel too comfortable in that role during his life. He did struggle with depression and isolation at times. He describes himself now as a recluse, as a social recluse. He wasn't one of the wild ones, although he was considered a partier in the sense that, you know, he did do drugs and he experimented with cocaine. He's saying coke being his drug of addiction. So he had a very addictive personality in that way, and the addictive disorders, and that caught up with him. That got the best of him in certain times and stages of his life and career. But overall, he just was a real person. He was just an authentic soul who came here to express himself creatively through music and experimentally through music and the styles. And he's highlighting like the voice and the style, like the vocals and the styles and choices and fashion. And, you know, he just had a flair for it all. He had a flair for the drama and over dramatic. But he's saying in a different sense than Freddie, because David was a little more experimental. He's saying he took it to another level, like, than Freddie, because he brought in like a lot of that galactic energy. So he was kind of flamboyant in a different way. He expressed his personality in a different way because he took on, literally he's saying he took on different personas. He actually wrote different characters, created these characters in his mind, and then he went on to perceive and live these characters through his music, kind of like a Broadway play or musical, he's saying, in a rock and roll show. He put on a show that would be like a rock opera or Broadway musical theater. He's saying he was very theatrical in nature and how he presented himself musically, and he challenged himself in that way. And that was a challenge for him, that he enjoyed writing music and enjoyed being creative. So that really shaped who he was and his personality. But he is highlighting that he kind of lived two separate lives, two separate egos. He's showing there was a separation of ego in a sense, because he had a life that he lived, which was very much his real name was David Jones. That's the name he was born with. But then I think he's showing in his not early teens, but late teens, maybe like 17 or 18, he's showing me when he first got into rock, rock music and the rock scene, or was creating his, wanting to be a musician, or recognizing that in him, in pursuing that passion, he created the persona David Bowie for himself. And that was like his stage character, much like Freddie Mercury changed his name from Farouk Balsara to Freddie Mercury early on in his career. And this is really what kind of shaped his like stage presence and musical talent or ability. Who he felt like he was on the inside as a musician. He was able to express more creatively through that persona, but he still kept that persona of David Jones. So he's kind of showing it as a split personality. That's really how it presented in his life, because he stayed true to the more traditional sense of himself through the David Jones, how he was in his home life with his well, he was married twice in his life, and he did have 2 children, I believe a son and a daughter in total. And so he was just very true to being a family man, and that was like more of his undercurrent, the undercurrent of like the ego. He's showing like the ego, the rock star personality was he kept that separate from his home life. So people saw him differently later on in his life when he started to settle down and move into that stage of his life. Yeah, so very cool. I would say that's exactly how I would have described him based on my dream, as being down to earth and really easy to talk to and just connect with. So how do you wish to help people as a spirit guide? Well, he's saying, I wish to help people find themselves again, to look within, to see the truth, see what's hiding in there, see all the aspects of yourself. He's highlighting multidimensional. We're multidimensional beings. We have galactic roots and heritage that most people are not consciously aware of. Although he wasn't consciously aware of those roots in his life, he was very much tapping into those aspects of himself and pulling that information forward through the characters that he wrote. He's showing that he lived mostly in his mind in the fantasy world. He lived a lot of, he was a lot in his mind. He was a lot, it's like he had this fantasy world going on in his mind, and he was very creative in that way. And he just thought of that as being part of his natural creative expression. But he's also saying unknown. It was an unknown origin where all these characters came from and all these ideas came from. And he's saying space oddity and Ziggy Stardust and all these titles of songs and albums that he wrote. And he's even showing like the musical notes and the sounds and the chords and just the lyrical content. And all of that related to this greater theme of the unknown, of this realm, this higher dimensional realm, where he felt connected to energetically, but he couldn't put his words to it. Like he couldn't put his finger on the understanding of how. He just knew that he's saying. He was part of this, this other world, otherworldly beings is what he's expressing. And it feels like, these came through in his dreams and in his visions, like his daydreams, and really fantasized about these characters and how these characters would be as earth beings is essentially what he's showing. And that's where the idea of Ziggy Stardust came in, which is literally one of his most famous albums, but it really made him a star. I think that album is what he seems to be showing me. He wasn't a star before that per se, even though he had written music before that, but Ziggy Stardust is what kind of brought him into the spotlight and drew in a crowd of people that really, they were kind of the misfits, or they were kind of the outcasts, is what he's saying, of society, because he came in and he created this persona as Ziggy Stardust, and all the songs on the album were about this guy who came from Mars is what I think I'm understanding. And I am not a David Bowie aficionado by any means, although he has been having me, that was the first album he had me listen to the day that he was coming in for some clients, and he had me like researching a little bit about that album so I could get a feel for his energy and how his message, the type of message he was going to want to come through with. All right, so let's just get back to yeah, how you want to help people as a spirit guide. Traverse the unknown. He's saying, I want to help people traverse the unknown and get to know those sides of themselves that are unknown, the latent aspects of oneself that really that's ready to come out. And he's saying, and a lot of it has to do with the starseed heritage, people not knowing that they come from Mars. He's saying, not literally Mars, he's saying, but other realities, that they're always connected to other dimensions, and that they have the ability to connect with these beings, these other beings and higher aspects of themselves, and communicate if they wish, or just be aware or present of the fact that this is part of their heritage, and you know, that we're all one, that we're living in a universe that is of unity consciousness, and that we're raising our frequency to remember that connection to the stars once again, and so that people don't have to feel alone and abandoned anymore, or not at home in this world anymore, because he's showing, because everyone's been so disconnected from that part of themselves for so long, that the world has really been running amok in a way, well, actually he's saying we're kind of running out of time to wake up. You know, it's just time to wake up. You know, that doesn't mean that doesn't have any fear attached to it. It's just like we're running out of time for people to just, you know, get on board with this idea. You know, the seed has been planted by people like him, and just putting it out there that there's a lot we don't know about ourselves. There's a lot we don't know about what else is going on around us, and we're just kind of caught in this like matrix type reality where it's just all one thing, and it's not. It's so much more than that. And so he's wanting us to expand our vision, expand our horizons, and I feel like that's one of his bigger messages for us today, at least. So let me ask him, well, actually that leads into my next question. What is your main message for us today, David, or in general for the collective? He's saying guidance, actually, which I find interesting. He's saying my main message is one of guidance and love. I come from a loving place. I come from a loving heart. I want to help you tune your awareness to the higher messages that want to come through from the galactic guides, not just me per se, he's saying. But there's a higher message out there. There's a higher reason why that he's choosing to come through, and that other guides like him, celebrity guides, are choosing to come through, and they all come from a little different of a perspective. But David himself is really connected to his galactic roots, and he's showing that he spends a lot of time in his galactic home planet. Would you like me to tell them? And he's like, yes, which is Andromedon. And he's highlighting, he always highlights androgynous when he talks about Andromedon. So Andromedon is his home planet, and that is going into what is your starseed origins. And he always, when I asked him this with a client wanted to know when he came through, and he said androgynous as in Andromedon, because he was very androgynous. At one point in his life, he said he was gay, and then he came out later and said he was bisexual, and then he came out again later after that and said he was a closet heterosexual. So he's changed forms. It's like his sexuality, he's saying, was very fluid. It was very fluid for him. Sexuality was fluid for him. It was a fluidity to it. He's like, it was neither here nor there. It was everywhere. It was all encompassing. It was whatever, he gravitated to in the moment, whatever he fancied in the moment, or his persona took on in the moment. He's saying it was creative. It was a creative expression. It was like art to him. How he expressed his sexuality was very much tied together with his music and how he chose to express himself creatively in his music and his fashion, and that's why he's so memorable. He's saying that's why he was considered an icon for so many, because it was really the outsiders at that time were the gay community and transgender potentially community that existed at that time. And he's highlighting the 70s, the early 70s is when all of this, when he was exploring his homosexual side. And he's saying, gender doesn't, he's like, that's why gender doesn't matter. That's also part of his main messages is he wants us to get away from labeling people or having the need to even really worry about what sex a person is. It doesn't matter what gender they are on the outside, whether or not it matches what society thinks that particular biological gender should be sexually attracted to, is what he's showing me. It doesn't matter. We all exist as one. And he's saying the higher up you get and the higher the dimensions you get, and when you get into the galactics, gender doesn't really mean a thing, he's saying. It is expressed differently by all. Some galactic beings come across as more like distinct in their masculine and feminine archetypes, he's saying, and he's calling them archetypes, because they're just a way of perceiving, right? They're just a form of consciousness is what he's showing. They're not like bound to like the physical. It's whatever you feel you are in your own mind, whatever you desire to be, what your heart desires to be in any given moment, and that can change. So he's really highlighting sexuality as being a fluid thing, and that's why it's hard to label for most people. Most people get stuck in this need to label and know, but the truth is it's very fluid, and it goes, it comes, and it goes. And if you start looking at it from that higher perspective, that gender doesn't really truly exist in the higher realms, then you'll come to start to see why it's not really that, why it shouldn't be that big of a deal, sorry, or topic, and why people don't really need to focus so much attention on that at this time. It shouldn't cause so much division and heartache and suffering for people. We're a collective, he's saying. We're a collective of humans, and it's all about loving everybody, regardless of how they choose to express themselves, as long as they're not harming others, is really the moral code that should govern everyone. So unity consciousness, he's big on fighting for unity consciousness, he's saying. That's part of his main message. He's saying to make that clear. Okay, so after asking him some of those questions, I'd like to ask him, well, I did some card pulls, and the first deck I pulled from was I don't have it with me, Work Your Light deck, I think is what it's called, by Rebecca Campbell. But basically I asked the question for David to pull the cards that best represent his message, mission, and purpose in his earthly, in his incarnation as David Bowie. So, yeah, his higher message, mission, and purpose. So these are the 4 cards that came out. So we'll get into that right now. The one is Get Grounded. And this person's taking like a Buddha-like pose, which is interesting. And the card says, empaths, highly sensitives, connect with nature. So anything you'd like to say about that? He says, well, one of my missions, although it's not that obvious, was to really ground and anchor in these higher energies. And he's highlighting the word sensitivities and empaths. He's like, because I was an empath. I was a highly sensitive being. I was essentially channeling. I was receiving downloads and activations all the time from my star brothers and sisters, and I didn't know it. I had no conscious connection of that. I often feared that, you know, because there was a lot of labels. He grew up in a family that had a lot of mental illness and issues like that, that maybe eventually I'd like to talk to him more about specifically about his family dynamic. But just for the sake of this video, I want to just highlight that he had a lot of people close to him in his family that were diagnosed with some severe mental health disorders at times. And, you know, he had that in his family, and he was aware of that. And he was a little bit nervous around, you know, picking up on that. So he was just saying there's a negative stigmatism about even being highly empathic, which he can see from where he's at now, that that's all that it really was. That, you know, he was getting, excuse me, downloads and visions and activations, but he didn't know that at the time. He didn't know the source of that at the time. He was just a little bit scared and skeptical that maybe he was going crazy at some times, and so there was a sense of disassociation even at times because of the stigma around the mental health, and he kind of felt the need to separate these characters out that he was playing out through his music to really designate or distinguish a separation of, like, I'm not that person, that's just the character that I'm forming. But really, it was part of his true nature. That was just kind of part of his way of receiving that information and not not going crazy with the information that was coming through, because he didn't fully understand it at the time. So he's highlighting grounding would have been really important for him. He didn't consciously do that, though. He didn't necessarily consciously go out and ground or even understand the concept of grounding at that when he was alive. But now that he does, he could see that he needed a lot of grounded energy. He's saying most musicians and music stars do, because most of them are empaths. You know, they're there performing in front of a crowd. They're feeling the energy of the crowd. There's a lot of energy in the room, and you're channeling the energy through your music, through your vocals, through, you know, so grounding is really important. And that's why he's showing a lot of rock stars turn to addictions and get caught up in that cycle, because it's lonely. It's a dark place to be when, you know, you're a very sensitive soul and you have all this energy coming at you, and you're always in front of the stage and performing, and with all this pressure on you. He's like, talk about under pressure. You know, there's a lot of pressure on an artist to not just perform well, but to sing it well and be on stage and have the stage presence, but to also, you know, create the music and have the hit and keep the records coming, he's saying. So it's a very difficult, you know, stardom. It's a difficult place to be, especially if you're a highly sensitive being and you're, you know, receiving all of this information and input all the time. You need a way to process that and express that, and that was through his music. And so that's why he became successful, because he was able to do it through his music. But he's showing that had he not had that creative capacity or opportunity, or understanding, it would have turned out differently for him, his life, and it could have taken a wrong turn for sure. But that's where the addictive substances come in. It's just like him needing to ground his energy and not knowing to do that, so turning to abusive substances that he abused, like cocaine. The next card for his, what was it again? Oh, higher message, mission, and purpose, themes, or messages. That's it. Break the chain, ancestral patterns, healing and rewriting the future. And so, yeah, what would you like to say about that card, David? He's highlighting ancestral patterns. Just for him, for his personal life and message. A lot of this is just about his higher mission for coming to Earth was to help kind of rewrite the future, and that's exactly what the card says, rewriting the future, but that's what he's saying, rewriting the future timeline. He's saying he came to plant a seed for future generations to be able to express themselves and be fluid, again, in their sexuality and their form of self-expression, so that others could feel safe in doing so, to liberate the soul of others who were feeling trapped and weighed down by the system, by the patriarchal system that was really suppressing a lot of people's emotions and true creative desires. And he's showing the music industry as being responsible for, negating a lot of music and stunting the growth of a lot of really good artists by not, by not drawing them out, by not playing certain sounds and types of music, not playing an eclectic range of music on the radio. He's saying, especially in his later years, even after the 70s and 80s, and his later years, he saw the rise in the girl bands and the boy bands, or whatever you want to call them, just music started to change. It's that pop culture scene. And he's saying it was kind of disgusting. It was kind of disgusting to watch. He didn't like to be so verbally vocal about it while he was here on Earth, but he feels safe in being able to say that, he could see the oh my God, what's this word? I can't say it, David. It's in my mind. Degradation of the music industry. It was just, it just started to go downhill, and it was losing its charisma. It was losing its flair and its uniqueness. There was just this cookie cutter kind of superficiality image, and just, the songs became really a void of meaning, and it was just all about, reproducing the same type of sound, and a new artist, and it just catchy, and it wasn't really, there wasn't a lot of soul or depth to the music. There wasn't a lot of symbolism or art to the music, and not that those artists weren't out there, he's saying, but they weren't being played on the radio, and he just felt like that was a crying shame. He's saying, he was really disappointed in how the music industry turned in the later years of his life, and he tried to keep it. David Bowie kept producing music till he passed away, and he tried to keep it alive in his music. But he had seen his day by that time, towards the end, and he had already done a lot. But it was just the scene of music had shifted a lot, and the attention just wasn't there as much on him in his later years of writing. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys know, watching, that I am editing this video a little bit more than some of my other ones, because I noticed my fan on my computer is coming on and off periodically quite a bit in as I'm filming, and I do know that affects the sound quality. So if you hear that coming on, I don't want to cut David off while he's explaining things, but there are times where I have to cut and then come back when the fan is not running, so it doesn't affect the audio of this footage so much. But you probably will pick up on it a little bit. Okay, so the third card that came out was Inner Temple, Devotion, tune into the portal of your heart. And so he's saying, yeah, that was my higher message also. And mission was just to tune into the heart, to be heart-centered, to live from the heart, to be true to myself, to express myself any way I chose, to live free is what he's saying, much like Freddie Mercury. We were born to be free, he's saying. We were all born to be free. You were all born to be free. And you all are free, he's saying. You truly are free. It's your own mind that binds you through it's the conditionings of your own ego and mind and self-serving mind that binds you, and the conditions that society puts on you, the cultural conditions that you conform to, that really hold you back from your own your own highest growth and your own highest potential and outcome, he's showing. So don't hold yourself back. You know, listen to that inner voice, listen to that inner calling, and set it free. Allow it to express itself. Be free to feel free to express yourself any way you choose, any way you want to dress, change up your look anytime you wish. You know, don't care what other people think. Don't care who's watching you or who's concerned, because you will find your tribe that way. And he's saying it's a similar message as Freddie Mercury would say, but, you know, I'll say it again because, you know, be free to be you, and you're free to decide who you want to be at any given moment. So tune into your heart and go with your heart's calling, what your heart is calling you to do. And don't be afraid. You know, you're on a mission. Don't be afraid to show your true colors, he's saying, and to draw attention to yourselves for what you actually believe in, and to serve others in a way that comes from the heart, he's showing, that's heart-based, because that was the life that he exemplified. That was the life that he lived as David Bowie. And so the fourth card I thought was interesting, and I was wondering what it meant, and I'm sorry it's not showing up on my screen. It says yes. And just say yes. And he's saying yes. Say yes to everything. Everything and anything your heart desires, say yes. He's talking about, and he's saying, I'm talking about your true heart. He's like, I'm not telling you to just go on out there and, you know, go hog wild, unless you're here to experience many things and experiment, and that's what you wish to do. He's just saying, go with what your heart wants and just say yes. You know, don't be afraid to say yes. That was my true mission, to say yes to everything that I wanted to try and experiment with. Experimentation seems to be a very major theme in his life. And living out his fantasies is what he's saying. Experimentation by living out his fantasies through a fantasy life. And he's showing like being a rock star icon is, you know, was him, represented him and his ability to express himself creatively by living out his fantasy of being a rock star. And then he pulled in all these other fantasy characters that came in that were other soul aspects of himself that he didn't recognize were part of him, but he maybe intuitively he's showing that he did know these characters were part of him or represented him in some way, parts of him that wanted to come out and be shared at different points in his life. It was like they were seeking integration, is what he's saying. These soul aspects of himself were seeking integration and understanding, and he learned to love. Would you say you learned to love these aspects of yourself? He's saying yes and no, because in the moment that I embraced them, he's like, I embraced them in a way, but I didn't necessarily always love all the parts and what they represented, you know, as far as I changed my mind a lot, he's saying. You know, I changed my thoughts and feelings about who I was and how I wanted to present myself changed, you know, according to my moods, according to, you know, my stage of development, according to who I was hanging out with, and according to what I was reading and what I was like taking in, like in through his mind. He shows himself as like an avid reader, like somebody that like was hungrily taking in like new information and went through phases. It appears of like reading what he would be reading and what he would like be researching or be into at the time. He went through phases and fads with things, but he was always like a seeker of knowledge and higher knowledge and wisdom. So, but he was drawn to very like fantastical things, he says, and he would get into these, he's showing it as like a rabbit hole. He would like go down a rabbit hole of some kind of something that piqued his interest and curiosity, and then he would kind of get into character through what he was learning, and he would almost like take on that frequency, is what he's showing, of the information that he was digesting is the word, or ingesting is the word. He's showing it as like he was like eating it up. He would take on the frequency of that information, and then he would play a role, and then he would play that out through his music and his the songs he would write. He would express that side of himself as it related to who he was in that moment. But the moment was always changing. He was always changing, so he was always being guided, he's shown, to create new characters and new versions of himself. He wasn't limitless. He wasn't limited in that way. He was limitless in his potential to create. He could have kept doing that his whole life, he's saying. He could have kept going on and on if he had chosen to, if he was able to live longer, he would have just kept reinventing himself the whole way through, because he just was not one to just stick with one genre or one style of being. He kind of wanted to explore and experiment with it all. Again, experimentation. So very interesting. David, where to go next? Would you like to go into the Ascended Masters that you most resonate with or admire, or some of your life lessons and themes? Because I pulled cards for both of those topics, I guess you could say. I'm hearing life lessons and themes, so let's go into that. So there was 5 cards I pulled from my Crystal Therapy deck by Doreen Virtue, and these represent his main life lessons and themes. And of course, the first card that came out of the deck was this one, Unconventionality. Your unique qualities are an important part of your life purpose. It's okay to feel and be different from others. And he's laughing. He's like, wouldn't you say that just about sums it all up or wraps it all up so perfectly? And I would have to agree. He's like, it's all I just said. It's all we just talked about. So we don't have to go so into it, because that was my nature, to be unconventional, to go against the norm, to go against the traditions. He's saying the societal traditions. He preached a different way, different concepts that were totally new at the time, but people embraced them. People embraced his ideas, and people were ready for that shift in consciousness at the time he came along. And he just rode that wave, is what he's saying, of unconventionality. The next card that came out is Be Gentle with Yourself. So these are his life lessons and themes. You've been through a lot and need time to heal and recover. He said that was probably the second most important theme of his life, was just, and it goes back to what came out, and he's saying the second card of this one that came out, which says, no, not that one. Sorry, I picked up the wrong one. Ancestral patterns healing. He's like, that was really part of his purpose and mission, was to help heal himself and recover all of his lost parts, is what he's saying, and rewrite and integrate those, but in a way that was gentle with himself. He's saying that's something that he learned more towards the end of his life. He's showing that he really needed to be a little bit more gentle with himself and how he treated himself. And he's talking about physically and mentally, and just like how he worked himself, and how he conditioned himself to believe, and to the way he looked at things, the way he derived meanings from things, is what he's saying. He said he did go through a lot of turmoil and changes and personal issues that he dealt with in his family, and things that hurt him in a way that like left a scar on him, and like traumas that he endured or picked up on, and he kind of maybe neglected or didn't really focus his energy on enough in the healing aspects, the true healing, like from within and without, he's showing. So, he needed some time to heal. He needed to spend more time. He needed to be a little bit more gentle on himself. He's showing himself to be kind of a workaholic, kind of an overdo it personality type, going a little too much to the extreme on the work side, and maybe not enough, kind of time for himself, and to really sit with his own feelings and his own he's showing himself like contemplating the meaning of his own life and his own relationships and connections to people and different people, and what they meant to him, and how to help heal those relationships or understand them in a way that was healing for him, is what he's saying. So the third one is prosperity, life themes and lessons. There's a positive shift in your flow of divine support. He's saying, well, obviously being prosperous in my life was an important theme because I was so successful and achieved such a high level of success and fame. I really struggled with learning how to balance it all. And he's talking about his own self-image of who he was. He kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but this card is kind of emphasizing that prosperity and fame aspect was always difficult for him to adjust to fully, like the persona that he was as David Bowie in the public eye and the persona that he was at home as David Jones. There was always that feeling of separation. He was very prosperous though, and did feel the divine flow of support, but you know, it was just a weird feeling for him to kind of get used to how to be and how to express himself in these different categories or ways or stigmas. It's like the societal expectations of what that means to be famous, and those types of you know, the issues that come around that. The fourth card that came out is socialize or join in, make healthy and supportive new friendships and connections by getting involved with a group of like-minded people. He's showing that this was just, you know, an important theme for him in terms of the groups that he was a part of, and in the way that he chose to express himself musically. It attracted a certain type of crowd, and he was proud of that. He was proud of his uniqueness, his unconventionality, and that he was able to draw in the group of like-minded people that appreciated his music. Because in the beginning, he was kind of out there, is what he was showing. Like in the first few albums and that he came out with, you know, there was maybe one song, I think it was Space Oddity, that became a real hit, and then he struggled a little while to kind of come up, struggled with a couple of different albums and different styles, and he really kind of was trying to find himself and just get noticed. From being kind of obscure at that point, but he was so different and out there with his presentation that a lot of people didn't get him at first. So he really kind of struggled to get noticed, is what he's saying, noticed for the right reasons, and for who he was creatively and what he could do, for people to truly see the potential in his work and to be drawn to appreciate it on that level, on the spiritual level, is what he's showing. People just didn't get it at first. So yeah, so the theme in his life that carried through is just, you know, growing a crowd and of like-minded people, and getting the attention of the right people who would then, you know, become huge Bowie fans and really love his music. And the fifth card is self-confidence through God confidence. So believe in yourself by believing in God working through you. And he's saying, yes, your divine power, essentially. Again, I don't feel like he understood it that way, but he felt some way. He's showing that he understood it. He wouldn't have necessarily worded it that way in his lifetime, but he definitely understood that he had a lot of power, that he, as he grew in fame, he grew in power, and he took that very seriously. He's saying he took his God-given power very seriously. He saw a lot of contradictions in the governmental systems and politics and the way things were going on. He was very much for peace, unity. He didn't quite understand, you know, why people couldn't get it right, you know, why people couldn't tune into the things that really mattered, that were the issues that really mattered, and find a way to express themselves in a way that was more unifying, in a more peaceful manner, instead of, you know, segregation and separation and, you know, racial issues. And peace on earth is really what he wanted to see and would have liked to have seen in his lifetime. But he understood that there what the blocks were to that, and he saw that from a bigger picture perspective. So he was all about, you know, utilizing your God power and divine power to make connections and bring people together, instead of pointing fingers at people, like, you know, as if they're not your brothers and sisters because they are of a different color or of a different race or religion as you. He's saying he had a desire to see everyone become united in love and brotherhood, but it just wasn't the time for that. So he said he would have liked to have seen, you know, that power of one in his lifetime. Okay, so since we're talking about that, we'll go into three cards that we pulled from, or he pulled from Metatron's deck. That was what he would have liked to have seen, I think it was, or I can't remember the question, but these are the cards from Metatron's deck. I'm getting a little tired now, but it kind of goes along with what he was saying. These are other messages that he would like to share through Metatron's deck. And the first one is love, relationships, and harmony. So peace and harmony for all. You know, living in a balanced world of harmony. That's what I think it's part of what his message is for us now. This is what's important to remember. That was the question. What are your messages for us now? And I pulled through Metatron's deck. That's by Amanda Ellis. And the inner child, hear and know me. He's saying, so really getting to know your inner child, because that's where your creativity and true self-expression comes from. That's where the innocence and purity comes from. It's when you learn how to express yourself and your gifts in a way that honors your inner child. It's your inner voice. He's saying we've learned to tune that out as we go into adulthood. And he's kind of showing the song Under Pressure. We are all under pressure to adapt and conform to the reality that society sets up for us, saying this is the way to do it. You got to do it this way, and then this way and that way. And it really teaches you to tune out your inner child, he's saying, but it's through your inner child that you learn how to play, that you become creative, that you bring the joy and happiness back and the vibrancy into life. And so playful expression is what he's saying is really important for us today. We really need to learn how to nurture and listen to our inner child and feed our inner child by giving it voice and allowing it to freely express itself creatively is what he's saying. And the last card messages for us were endings. You are held. He's just wanting us to look at the ways you are being supported. Look at the people out there in your community who are tuned to your vibration, who do support the same ideals and the same values, who have the same values. Look to harmonize with them, and then he's highlighting endings as representing there's endings and new beginnings, and he's saying sometimes certain relationships come to an end so that you can find people who are like-minded. Sometimes it is time to move on from certain groups, not to get held. Don't allow yourself to be held back by the points of views of others that you no longer agree with. He's saying just because you shared a vision or an agreement at one point, when your mind changes and shifts in a new direction, go with the flow of where that direction wants to take you. And again, in this card, you see water, and there's the bridge, and he's showing that the bridge, he's saying, is the bridge to a new world. Be willing to cross that bridge when it comes, when it presents itself. Don't be afraid to move on in new directions, into new horizons, because that's where you're going to see the light. So he's showing the sun. That's where your new path is, and you're going to meet more people on that path that really align with your soul mission. So don't be afraid to speak your truth. Don't be afraid to come out of the shadows, he's saying. and be who you are and express who you are, even if that expression is different from who you were yesterday, he's saying. So it may not be the same person you were yesterday. You might have changed your mind about something and you're afraid to say, oh, now I believe in this, whereas yesterday I was adamantly on this side of the perspective, or I had this perspective of things, and something shifted and changed and now I'm over here. But he's saying don't be afraid to show that you've changed and be willing to express yourself differently. And it's like he's basically saying don't get attached to any of your previous identities. You can always change at the drop of a hat and nobody will question you. He's saying, yeah, at first people might question you, like your close friends, like, what do you mean? How did that? But he's like, if you express yourself clearly and you communicate yourself clearly, in a way that isn't necessarily judging others or degrading others and how they're choosing to believe, then you'll be fine. You will attract a following or tribe that resonates with you. It does take time sometimes, but you have to be willing to step out of the closet a little bit and just give voice to your truth. And truth can change. It changes from time to time, he's saying. And there's no shame. He's saying you shouldn't have any shame around how you were before. He's showing is like, he had a character. He had Ziggy Stardust, that he basically was in this character and on stage and through his music, and even like off stage, he was really expressing himself as this galactic character. And that was like 18 months of his life, and then he just let it go. He just had to give it up because it was just becoming too much, and he felt himself getting a little lost in this persona. And then he moved on to form new characters that were different from Ziggy, but had their own way about them and expressed themselves in their own way. So his fashion would change according to the characters, and one of them was the Thin White Duke. And I think he was in that character for a time, around the same time that he was heavily doing cocaine, and where he was like at his most, into cocaine, like, as an addict. And he doesn't even remember most of like recording the album or producing the album that he did as the Thin White Duke. But he, there's a lot of, it was more of a darker time in his life. So the character was darker in nature. So the topics and the themes of the music was darker. And, later on when he looked back in interviews, he would just say, yeah, that wasn't maybe my best, side or whatever. But, he didn't hold on to that too much. He didn't shame himself over it and like never go back to music again because he was embarrassed. He just changed it up again. He just kept changing and shifting, and people continued to move with him and accept him through those changes. So I feel like that is an important thing for us all to know and hear, David. So thank you for sharing that. Then we will couple more things we'll talk about, and then maybe we'll end soon. Some of the last cards I pulled were just his personality traits, but also I think relevant to his themes. And I'll just go through them basically because they're ones that I think we can kind of relate to since we've already been talking to him for a while. I don't think we need to go into each card, but they were generosity. So he's highlighting generosity of spirit. He was very generous to the people that he loved and supported, and those who supported him were very generous towards him in their love for him. And he was very well respected, and he very much appreciated the amount of respect he had as a musical artist and as a soul on earth, for the talents that he brought. He was definitely idolized by a lot of people and well respected by not just the music industry, but people that he was an actor and he acted in movies, so he had a lot of respect and authority in a certain way. Healing So again, the healing card came up. Strength, one of his best traits. Success, obviously he was successful. And courage, he had the courage to live up to his fullest potential and to put himself out there in a shocking and abstract way, but people loved him for that, for his uniqueness. So he really, he's saying, this was the other card, took refuge in that. He's saying he really took refuge in how he was able to accomplish that in his life, and that's why he lived a fairly, he was comfortable in his skin, it feels like, being himself, because he felt respected. And yeah, he was able to take refuge in the fact that he had a lot of support as well for what he was doing. And passage came up, and it was just a rite of passage, he's saying. It was just a passage through time. He's showing it's like a portal in time that really, he opened the doorway or this portal or passage for other people to follow through, not just, he's saying people in the industry that really looked up to him. There's a lot of artists that reference David Bowie as, their idol growing up, and a lot of people that felt more comfortable expressing themselves different ways because of him as a role model. So passage, he created a passage for people like him to feel accepted and loved. And lastly, I have just different ascended masters who he pulled from my Keepers of the Light deck that he feels drawn to or feels like represents him in some way, his frequency. And I found it interesting that the first one that came out was the Miriam. And these are two twin white angels that were around Jesus, I think at the time of his passing. If I'm not mistaken, they came to Mary Magdalene when Jesus passed. I'm not sure if that's absolutely correct, but they have to do with Jesus and Mary Magdalene and in the Bible. But essentially, I haven't channeled them before, but he's just showing that there's just like the twin aspects of his soul. That's kind of what this represents. It's more like energetically for him, how he was talking about the split personality sides of himself. He had like the David Jones side and the David Bowie side, and then he had these other aspects that broke off from there. So it's just that representation of like, there's more there's more sides of you than just, one side. There's many different sides, and being able to reflect that is part of what it means to be true to yourself and your own authentic nature. The other Ascended Master that came out was Sanat Kumara, and I just did a energy update with him and his twin flame, Lady Venus. He's from the planet Venus. He's an Ascended Master, but he's a galactic feel to him because he's from the planet Venus. So let me ask what David's highlighting. He's saying, he's just highlighting that, this is an Ascended Master that he resonates with because he is a galactic, but he's also very loving, and he's very much about Christ consciousness and unity consciousness, which is what David represents. And we did talk about David being from Andromedon, right? So, and I did want to ask David a little bit about how he feels about his planets, where he's from, and because he's saying he's very proud of where he's from. He's very proud of what he's from, where he's from. To describe it, his planet and kind of like the characteristics that go with his the personality or where he was raised or his lifetimes on there. How would you describe Andromedon's, David? He's showing like is this correct? He's saying authoritarian, authoritative, authority is highlighting that type of word. He's like very like sergeant, like dude, like report for duty. He's said that to me a few times where I've asked him some questions. You know, I'm here for reporting for duty. Is what he would say, like kind of commander, lieutenant like. Very like specific. Very. He's saying to the point, but very assertive. It's like divine masculine archetype. The energy of that planet. It feels like he's kind of comparing it to Mars, actually, very Martian, and Mars is a very divine masculine planet, whereas Venus would be more love. But he's saying, you know, love in his heart always, you know, not to say that Andromedans don't have that feminine aspect, divine feminine aspect, but they're more like they're action oriented. It feels like they're like perfectionists almost in their approach, specific, like detailed, like they notice all the details is kind of how he's showing it. They're fine-tuned to the details of just how things look and the orderliness of things and how they are presented. So an eye for details is one of the qualities and traits of an Andromedan, it feels like. And he's highlighting metal. It's like a metallic type of energy. If highlighting the element of metal, it has the qualities of metal, and from an elemental perspective, if you're talking about the elements, like we're more like water here on Earth, is what he's saying, but they're more metallic in their presentation and their symbolism as well, it seems. So think of the qualities of metal, like shiny, pristine, polished, strong, hard, like not curvy, but like pointed, you know, even though metal can be soft, like smooth and curved. He's talking about just like the strength of it, the dynamic of it. It's not fluid. It's more like set. So interesting. Bond, like strong bond. So it feels like they're very loyal. They have a very loyal nature to them. Andromedans. It feels like they have a specific way of doing things and a specific order of doing things. So. So did you carry those traits in your, they have a step-by-step process and way of doing things is what he's showing. So I'm going to ask him, did you have those traits in your own life, your own personal life? Saying yes, very much. I could be very rigid and structured in the way that I presented myself, and very particular and detailed in my look and, you know, like my outfits, and you know, and my creativity was very expressive in many ways, but I was very like pointed in how I wanted to present myself. I was very to the T, like, you know, down to every detail. I perfected things in that way. I was a perfectionist in that way, and it came through in my music, and you know, the precision and the sound and in the presentation of my music was very pointed and specific, and it related to. So I brought through that Andromedan and even that like spacey galactic feeling, a metallic feeling came through in my music, is what he's saying, and the masculinity also came through, even though I showed my feminine side. You know, I still kept, you know, my masculine ways. He's saying it's a little complicated. He's like, if you're just looking at me as like Ziggy Stardust, you know, you're only seeing like one side of me. You know, you have to know the David Jones side as well, and the other sides as well. So he's saying don't judge a book by its cover, but what he means by that in this particular case is don't judge a whole man by one presentation of him. He said, he was multifaceted. He had many sides of himself. So think of him as a diamond, as a metallic diamond of some sort. Um, there's many different facets inside. So you can't really look at just one aspect of who he was and one character of who he was, version of who he was, and see the whole man or know the whole man. You have to take everything into account. But he was very intelligent. He was highly intelligent, highly creative, and highly ambitious. And it's like he sensed his full potential, and he really came here to express it and show it. And he was always wanting to learn new things. So he talked about that earlier, being an avid reader and just taker in of information and new information. So he said that was part of his Andromedan qualities as well. The third ascended master came out was Mercury, and he's highlighting communication. He really felt like communication was key for him, so being able to speak clearly and intelligently and express himself clearly. And he's saying not just in his interviews and how he talked to people and expressed himself, but also through his music. So lyrically, how he communicated his thoughts and his feelings, and that was really important to him. Like the lyrics of the songs had a lot of symbolism in them, and expressed a lot of higher ideas, and then they were very vague also, and open-ended also. So there was a lot that could go to the imagination. But generally he had a specific meaning and intention behind every song that he created. It was very specific. So how he communicated himself through his music was really important to him. So he resonates with Mercury, who's like a messenger god. And then Lord Shiva came out, which I thought was interesting. So any connection with Lord Shiva? And the card says transcendence. So yeah, transcending all limitations, all boundaries of self and ego. So shedding the ego is basically killing the ego. He's saying that was something he was learning how to do on Earth. He wouldn't say he successfully accomplished his mission fully. I mean, he wouldn't say he reached enlightenment per se, but he would say that he got, really close to expressing himself in a way that was limitless, that was very freeing for his soul and liberating for his soul, and it was in alignment with his soul contract. So he accomplished his mission, but I mean, could he focus more on enlightenment maybe in the next life? Yeah, certainly, he's saying, certainly I could give and devote more attention to spirituality and transcending the ego, not needing to be in the limelight per se, or recognized on such a grand scale to be a master or self-mastery. He's highlighting, so that might be something that he wishes to achieve in another earthly incarnation. And the last one I thought was interesting is Green Tara. And he's highlighting, well, I've always had, and I'm not sure if she's a Chinese or Japanese culture, or Buddhist, she's some Asian culture, which is all that matters. And he's always had a fascination with the Asian cultures, and he's always had an affinity for the Asian cultures. He's highlighting his song, Little China Girl. And I feel like there's another song maybe that references Japan even, but I can't think of it, or I'm not sure where he talks about that, maybe in an interview. But basically, he has a love of all cultures, but he really had a fascination with the Asian culture. And so Green Tara is the Ascended Master here, and she represents supreme protection. Anything you'd like to say about her, David? Yes, there's just that she's like an embodiment of the divine feminine aspect, and just what represents like unity, again, consciousness, being whole, within your heart and soul, like, all of that energy, and then the nature, the forces of nature, and Mother Earth. He's highlighting with her, like there's a lot of earth energy with her as a goddess. And yeah, it doesn't feel like he has a lot to say, but just that there's that connection he feels towards her energy, or her as a bodhisattva is what it is, a female, a Buddha, essentially. That type of energy, he said, is very calming and nurturing and compassionate, and compassionate with self and all creatures on earth. So he really embraces that vision and strives to be that, like energetically, or represent that energetically. So as we all should. Okay, so I feel like we really did cover a lot of ground. One of the last questions I'll answer though today is any advice on how to get in touch with our... No, I'll do that one next time, actually, but are you close to Freddie Mercury and George Michael was the last question somebody wanted to ask, and I already know the answer to this, but we'll just ask him officially. And he's saying yes, of course. You know, we already talked about Freddie and how, you know, we did that song together, and we were good friends, and I enjoyed working with him. He's saying while I was on Earth, but yeah, we hang out in heaven. You know, where Freddie calls me in, we're around each other, and we enjoy each other's company up here, and George Michael as well. We all, it's like he's showing, like we get together and we talk at the round table, or the table sometimes, and talk about what's going on Earth, and just share our perspectives, and, you know, reminisce a little and lessons learned. And but as spirit guides, you know, we do show up for people, and sometimes as a trio. It just depends on what is called for, and what that person, who they resonate with. He's like, you know, we've come in for you, the three of us together. So, which they have. They all came in at like back-to-back songs on the radio. One time and it was because they wanted to be introduced, or David, well, actually they said all of them wanted to be introduced to this one specific client, but ended up being David that wanted to really step forward. So that was kind of a funny morning and experience when they all came through. I'm like, well, you're all three here? Like, wow, that's pretty bold. So yeah, so they work together in that way. They call in each other, and they're all brothers up there, he's saying. But they also have separate lives too. Like they're not always around each other. They're not like that. He's saying they're not like roadies. They don't like travel together. They're not on the road together. He's saying, like going everywhere together and traveling on tour together. But they're just they're apart most of the time. But they can come in an instant if need be. So, but they do seem to travel a little bit in separate circles of friends. I feel like Freddie and George maybe come together more together these days. It feels like, but I know I'm getting tired, and I know this video is probably more than an hour long at this point in time. It's hard to keep it short. There's just a lot to talk about with David. I was a little overwhelmed even when I first started sensing that I was getting close to doing the video. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just so much. I mean, there's so much about his life. There's just a lot he did as an artist, and there's so many questions I could ask him. But I think it's interesting enough what he shared with us, and for any of you who are fans of his work and music, I'd love to hear what you think of just the things that he shared with us today, if that resonates as to how you perceived him to be, if it was helpful for you to learn more about him in this way. I think these interviews are fun. I really enjoy talking to the celebrities because they've been here, done that, and they have a lot of life lessons and things that they can share with us. I have a lot more questions for him. Some of the questions in the next video that we're going to cover are any advice on how to get in touch with our starseed family members. What do you think of the legacy you've left behind looking back, what do you want people to know about your music? Some of that we might have already talked about here. Are there any songs of yours that you are very proud of now that weren't fully unearthed? Any members of the Heart Squad, that's Amanda Ellis's term of the celebrity guides that come through that I've channeled, including David Bowie, alive today, or have the, are there any of those members still alive today, or has the collective moved on and mission complete? And a few more questions even after that. So we'll jump into a new video next time, but that's all for now. Thank you for being here. Please don't forget to leave a comment about the video, and also don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when the next videos are released. And also, if you're not already, please don't forget to join my Patreon site, because there will be videos there that I do that I don't share on YouTube, and new content on there also. So all of the links to my Facebook group, my business page, and my Patreon site are in the description box below. I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.